Okay, and we can start. Okay, I would like to give you all warm welcome on behalf of Voices of Faith. And I would like to welcome to this meeting when we are hosting extraordinary guests from India. We in Voices of Faith have been working for empowerment of women in the church for some years already. And from this year on, we dedicate our special attention to religious sisters. We are very happy to hear a real story of sisters' empowerment coming from India today. Let me just mention some technical issues. As we are many on the Zoom, please keep your microphone muted for the whole meeting. If you have any questions to our speakers, please put them on the chat box during the meeting. We will collect them, and as time permits, we will ask some of them at the end of the meeting. I shall now welcome warmly a person who we are honored to call our friend, Dr. Astrid Lobo Gajiwala, who has a PhD in medicine and many postgraduate diplomas in medicine, bioethics, and theology. And all her professional life being active in medicine, she contributed hugely to the empowerment of women in the church in India. Astrid, please tell us more about the document that gathered us today and introduce our wonderful guests.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Susanna. And I'm really happy to be here and happy to reconnect with many friends who I have made through the Voices of Faith. I'd like to start by giving a little background about the document. And I just want to say that this document has just recently been released, just last month. And the church in India is abuzz. The book is entitled, It's High Time, Women Religious Speak Up on Gender Justice in the Indian
Susanna,
Church.
mi dai per favore il canale di interpretazione? Non riesco a parlare.
The book is a report of a survey conducted among superiors general and major superiors in India, and it's been put together by Sister Hazel D'Lima, who is one of our panelists today, Cletus Uzarte, and Pallavi Khalko. It's a landmark document, not because it's saying anything new, but because issues which are usually swept under the carpet for fear of inviting the wrath of powerful priests and bishops are finally out in the open. For the first time, we have hard data that cannot be discounted. Women religious from across India have courageously called out the exploitation that they experience in the church. Sorry, I think somebody needs to put their mic on mute. 5 years ago, in February 2016, a group of progressive Catholic religious in India, known as the Forum of Religious for Justice and Peace, had sent a letter of concern.
Astrid, sorry, unmute yourself, sorry.
Okay, not quite sure where I came in, but I was just talking about the Forum of Religious for Justice and Peace, where 5 years ago, they had sent out a letter of concern to bishops and major superiors. And in it, they condemned the fact that cases of sexual violence on religious women go unaddressed, and its perpetrators often go scot-free. They demanded an immediate end to the practice of denying nuns the sacraments when there is disagreement with the parish priest. And they decried attempts to domesticate and destroy the legitimate autonomy of religious life by giving a bishop total control over priests and nuns in the diocese. At the time, Mr. Manju Kulapuram of the Sisters of Mercy of the Holy Cross, who's the National Secretary of the Forum, went on record saying that the poor treatment of Catholic religious women by male members of the church is a very serious problem. And if it comes out, it will be like a tsunami. Well, 2 years later, the tsunami struck in the very heart of the Vatican. In March 2018, Women, Church, World, the monthly women's supplement of the official Vatican newspaper, Romano carried the lead article entitled The Nearly Free Work of Sisters by French journalist Marie-Lucille Koubaki. The article exposed how nuns are often treated like servants by cardinals and bishops for whom they cook, clean, and do the laundry, working long hours for random and meager pay. They are rarely invited to sit at the tables they serve. And now we have this study commissioned by the women's section of the CRI, the Conference of Religious of India, home to the world's largest number of women religious, estimated to be about 90,000, belonging to around 500 congregations. To tell us more about the study, we have here with us Sister Hazel D'Lima, former Superior General of the Daughters of the Heart of Mary, and the only woman to be president of the National CRI. She was also the former principal of the College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan, that collated and analyzed the results of this survey. We also have with us Sister Nuella De Souza, former provincial of the Missionaries of Christ Jesus, and former president of the local unit of the CRI, as well as former secretary of the Western Region CRI. She was there from the inception of this study and carried it till it saw the light of day. Our third panelist is Brother Philip Pinto, former Superior General of the Congregation of Christian Brothers and former president of the National CRI. He wrote the preface to the book from which the title is taken. To quote him, "I have sat in silence as individual sisters wept through telling their stories. Enough, it's high time. This is now the call for action." Well, this study is definitely a revolutionary study and it's going to cause...
I don't know what I did. It's on. The meeting is being
study.
continue.
Noella?
Yes, Astrid.
Sorry, I asked you about, if you could tell us briefly how this study was created and what you hope to achieve with it.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. Well, in April of 2018, invited by Rita Pinto, the president of the National CRI Women's Section, 4 of us met to look at what the articles you mentioned voiced, to know if there was any truth in them or not. At that meeting, in addition to Rita and myself, there was you and Virginia Saldana. We were all fired and wanted to take it further immediately. So much so, after that meeting, we were already working on statements we could send religious women and other women we knew who an opinion. Kochurani here is one of them. It was later that Hazel and her team joined us. And then, of course, when we began working on it scientifically with the research unit of the College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan, Mumbai.
So how did you get the CRI to come on board? The general impression is that the CRI usually tends to play safe because many congregations don't want to antagonize the bishops on whom they are dependent. How did you get that to take this?
The last 7 years is a very different one from the one you portray. I know that at the local and regional levels, we have been trying to bring the socio-political life of the church and society into our discussions. And I must say, we have always been met with much enthusiasm from the sisters, especially the younger ones who want a different model of religious life. Sisters who wish to bring real life into their spirituality. Sisters who wish to respond to the needs of the day.
I'm really happy to hear that, Noella, and to hear that there are winds of change. But, you've pointed out that it's the younger sisters who are pushing for all this. And yet your questionnaire was sent out to the superiors of the congregations, who I'm guessing are the more senior ones. So isn't it a fact that the superiors themselves can sometimes be very patriarchal and often toe the line of the bishops? Hazel, would you like to respond to that? Hazel, you're on mute. Can't hear Hazel.
On mute. Yeah. Okay, you have unmuted me. Okay. you know, we had to keep in mind the consideration of the research possibilities and therefore to have a sample, a universe that was manageable for the purposes of the research. We could not possibly plunge into the large sea of 90,000 religious sisters in India, which would have demanded enormous resources in terms of planning, personnel, and cost. Therefore, these are the practical considerations regarding the choice. Many of the major superiors, besides, are quite young. Not all of them are so senior. They are young and enthusiastic, and we strongly recommended to them that they should not fill the questionnaire just on their own, as if it was a personal thing addressed to them, but to have a dialogue with their sisters in the communities, especially those who were out in the fields at the grassroots level.
I just want to add that these two superiors can be very patriarchal, but the overwhelming response we got, I will never forget, was almost unanimous. Mira can vouch for that. The auditorium reverberated with the yeses of those 500 also, wanting, desirous, and eagerly keen that such a study be undertaken.
But yet only 123 responded, Noella. And I was just wondering, Hazel, why you think this was so, that, out of 500, you just had 123 responding? Hazel, you're on mute.
Well, again, I have to say that out of the 500 estimated numbers at the CRI National Assembly, we received 121 replies, which means we got a 25% sample, which is good enough for an exploratory survey. We were hoping to have more responses, but numbers tend to diminish when it comes to filling a written questionnaire, and that too a questionnaire which did ask some probing questions. We could not have coped with the demands of a larger universe. Not having the secretarial staff, we had to work with the help of the College of Social Work, with the faculty expertise that was made available and limited funds. Being a first study of its kind, also, this is very important, we were more keen on knowing the issues that mattered for sisters and their feelings about their working relations in the mission. Hence, we needed both quantitative and qualitative information. But to gain insights into questions, into situations, the qualitative data was more important. And the three researchers, what is it?
No, please continue. Please continue. Yes.
Yeah. And so the three of us researchers spent months analyzing.
Wir haben Monate damit verbracht, die Daten zu analysieren. Und wir haben die qualitativen Daten vor allem analysiert. Und die Botschaft haben wir versucht dann auch entsprechend.
One of the translators is on. Sorry, if we can.
Yeah, she's a very audible. Yeah. Then at the time of filling in the questionnaire, some sisters shared that bishops were keen on knowing what was shared at the National Assembly, and they were not quite happy. They showed their disapproval of the study. This created some fear in the minds and hearts of sisters, who then wondered if they should participate, whether they should put in writing their thoughts, and with what consequences. Later on, even the executive committee seemed to be plagued by such fears, and thus withheld their consent to the publishing of the study.
Actually, we got such a tepid response from the National Executive that towards the end, we had to seek legal counsel to reassure ourselves that we could and should get it printed. And more important, disseminate the study to all the respondents and bishops in the country.
that was one of the reasons why you had a delay in, publishing, because I do know that it was because problem, it got. So Hazel, I want to ask you, you've worked most closely with this study, looking at it, analyzing it, reading all the responses of various sisters. And I want to ask you, what did you find? What really struck you about the study? What, jumped out of the study and hit you?
Well, what struck me was that there were not so many sisters in the sacristy or in full-time housekeeping jobs in church institutions. Most of them had part-time or full-time pastoral work with children, youth, families, women, counseling, small Christian communities, spiritual animation, and what have you, all kinds of pastoral work in which they were involved. But for the respondents, that means for the sisters, the working relationships are most important. The relationships which help to build confidence, understanding, and encouragement, which show respect for sisters and appreciation of their efforts, their potential, and also respecting their religious and community life. In a few cases of successful working, I noted that when there were written agreements before the foundation, it was important to make things clear on both sides. There were less problems later. But in most of the cases, there was a sense of fear to dialogue. Too many demands being made on the time of the sisters, a sense of rivalry sometimes in the works that were being conducted, a lack of understanding and the sense of respect from priests, not enough of a sense of shared planning and execution of tasks. Then when they tried to have a dialogue with the hierarchy, it often did not change things for the better, and even at times created a certain hostility between the priests and the women religious, to an extent that one of the major superiors said she preferred now not to represent these problems anymore because they led to more complications. It was remarked, however, that much depended on individual priests, bishops, and their perception of things. Many of them did make efforts to ameliorate the situations. Finally, let me say that in reading the pleas of sisters for greater respect and recognition in the mission of the church, the following thought struck me very forcefully: that the church will realize her fullness of being and the richness of a witness in our world when women are treated as equals with appreciation of their gifts of nature and of grace.
Noella, would you like to say something?
Yes, what I found disturbing is what I call sacramental blackmail that is mentioned in this study. There are priests who misuse their power and who use the sacraments to get even with sisters. Should they not be heeded and given the prestige and power they desire? However, I also want to cite an example bringing in another dimension. When a provincial I know, and she is here today, asked her community not to attend Mass in the parish because of the arrogant behavior of the concerned. The sisters turned around and told the priest that they didn't attend the Eucharist because the provincial didn't like it. So we are our own enemies at times. Once again, to keep in good books of the clergy.
Noella, it's very interesting that you should mention sacramental blackmail, because this is something that the forum had also mentioned. So obviously, it's a very serious problem, at least here in India. And, I found when I was reading the study, there was a very interesting example where, a superior talks of the community defying the parish priest and conducting their own communion service because he refused to come, to celebrate Mass. And what do you think the parish priest did? He comes there and he locks the tabernacle and he gives the key to the bishop. So, it's appalling. Philip, what do you think about priests who do this, and what is the best way to stop such sacrilegious behavior?
Thank you, Astrid. While instances like the one you quoted are extreme, they're not isolated. They reveal attitudes that are sinful and which arise from a bad theology. It is about the theology of the priest and the meaning of ordination. It is about power and privilege. It is what the Pope refers to as a scourge of the church, clericalism, and all that goes with it. It is about patriarchy and a mistaken understanding of God that we have grown up with. These are very deep-seated issues and part of a sinful church culture. We are seeing the fallout of this, not just in the way that women are treated, but in the whole abuse issue that the church is grappling with at present. The same mentality that allows a priest to act in the manner you quoted allows him also to abuse someone with impunity, allows a bishop to shield priests guilty of other forms of abuse. It is the old boys club. We are different, the rules don't apply to us. How does one stop such behavior? By refusing to tolerate it. We shake the dust off our feet and move on, like the Gospel for Tomorrow says. Do we have the stomach for this? Why do other congregations of women come in to replace the group that leaves? To me, this is the same thing as transferring a priest from one parish to another after he has abused people in the first parish. What do we mean by zero tolerance? Look at Pope Francis. He has allowed a cardinal to stand trial for fraud in the Vatican. No cover-up. That is transparency and a sign of change. Do we have the courage to do something similar? Can we say we will not be party to abusive behavior?
Philip, you've gone to the root of the problem when you talk of the theology of priesthood and clericalism being a scourge of the church. But you've also thrown a challenge to the sisters. Why do other congregations of women come in to replace the group that leaves when they know there are exploitative conditions? Noella, would you like to answer that?
Well, sometimes congregations feel that if they change their personnel and strategy, things may work, but not always so. Also, many of us sisters, without critiquing or thinking further, continue in the same group. In those cases, I think we fall into the sin of passivity. This is where our formation is so important. Why is it that young people in the corporate world, in the same age group, are so adept in critical thinking? And why not our young women? What happens in our community?
That's a very good question, Noella. But before we take it up, I want to go back to something that Philip said. He touched on something that the study, strangely, is almost silent about: clergy sexual abuse. The study talks of verbal abuse, but there is no mention of clergy sexual abuse, although in recent times, there have been a number of cases that have hit the headlines in India. And in fact, currently, as you all know, in the Indian church, a bishop is being tried for allegedly raping a nun several times. So what is the reason for this silence? Noella, would you like to comment?
Well, I think we know that we're all ready to work with other sisters who have been sexually abused. But we also know how difficult it is to talk about ourselves. It takes years at times to open up, if ever. So also in the study, only 3 respondents alluded to it, no more. Also remember, it was the major superiors answering. If the sisters in communities had to answer, they might have been more agreeing to the question of sexual abuse. Yes, with the case you refer to, many of us have worked and are still working on it. But I sincerely hope justice will prevail, not only in the courts, but in the church too. I salute the sister for being so brave and courageous to name her abuser, and the young sisters who are standing by her. I also have great admiration for their determination to see the case through, despite all the opposition against them and the marginalization to which they are being subjected.
One of the issues that struck me in the study was about property. the bishop and the clergy seem to have the power to interfere, control, and dispose of land in the possession of women religious, even though internal agreements and official documents exist in favor of the women. I want to ask Philip this question. Do men's congregations have the same issues? If they do, how do they handle them? And if not, what's the difference?
The question you ask of land and property is, I believe, one of the oldest sins of the church. It's probably the area where the church most noticeably strayed from the ways of the early Christian community. In the beginning, we are told they shared all things in common. But after that, slowly, wealth and power went hand in hand. To answer your question about men's congregations, yes, men's congregations also go through the same problem. And how do we deal with this? On the practical level, we need to pay great attention to the contracts we make with dioceses. My experience is that people look for some minor breach of the contract as an excuse to step in. Don't give them that excuse. Everything needs to be put down in writing. There's no such thing as a gentleman's or a gentlewoman's agreement. You may have excellent relationships with a particular bishop, but then later on, a pharaoh comes along who knows not Joseph, and everything changes. Good fences make good neighbors. This is a legal undertaking, and we need to follow legal advice and protocols. My experience also is that male congregations are more robust in their dealings with the diocese, women less so. And dioceses can bully and intimidate women. And women are slow to go to court to seek redress because it is against the church. On another level, we have to accept a fundamental blindness about the way the diocese sees the presence of religious among them, a blindness about the meaning of mission, a blindness about church. The church is not just the hierarchical church. We are the church. The diocese is not the only element of the church in mission. All of us are players in the field, and this needs to be acknowledged and provided for. The laborer is worthy of his or her hire.
That's very good. Contract, so nothing is left to the whims of the bishop or the parish priest. You've also reminded us that the church is not just the clergy and bishops, but all of us. But it appears when I was reading the study that even among women, there are differences. So Noella, in your interview with Matters India, for instance, you say women religious are definitely considered less equal than other lay women in the Indian church. So, well, why do you think so?
For one, we are cheap and even free labor. When we work for parishes and other church-related institutions, we are paid just a stipend because the clergy think we're looked after by our congregations, although that is no longer true. Oftentimes, sisters are told that they have vowed to work for God. And as they've given their lives to work for Him, they cannot ask for salaries. Would a clergyman dare to say that to lay women who need the money for the upkeep of their house and to bring up their children? Can the clergy themselves live off the meager stipends they give us sisters? Their expenses come out of the collections received on certain Sundays. Sisters, on the other hand, rarely get travel allowance, holiday and health allowance, pension, like other workers. So why are sisters different? Don't we work as hard? Why are we less deserving? Recently, I was invited to work full-time as a social worker for a parish here in Bombay for rupees 5,000. And when I asked why such a paltry sum, the priest turned around and replied that he thought I had retired, so I didn't need a salary. He couldn't offer me a salary. Nothing could be further from the truth. It goes without saying I didn't take up that offer. However, I want to say that not all clergymen are like this. There are some who do give sisters their due recognition and respect, but these are only a minority.
So Noella, you've highlighted something that sisters across the world are talking about, namely the difference between service and servitude. And in fact, Pope Francis has also made this point quite strongly. In May 2016, when he was talking to the International Union of Superiors General, he said that they should have the courage to say no when their superiors ask for something that is more servitude than service. He said that sisters should be in the streets, in schools, and with the sick and poor, rather than carrying out errands for a parish priest. Hazel, you have been Superior General of your congregation for 2 terms. From your experience, do you think it's possible to say no to one superior or to a parish priest in the Indian church? What would be the consequences?
Well, for me, servitude is the...
Go ahead.
Servitude is the attitude of abasing oneself to please authority or to find favor with authority.
She's still asking you the question. Now you have to start. Yeah, now start.
Now I start?
Start from servitude.
For me, servitude is the attitude of abasing oneself to please authority or to find favor with authority. Service, on the other hand, is offering oneself in an attitude of outreach, which empowers the other. The question is, do I remain at the beck and call of a superior or a priest or a bishop, or am I concerned about carrying out the mission that is entrusted to my religious society and to the church? If I find myself being used merely as a pawn in the hands of authority, I have to say no. We are sent, like Jesus, to bring life to the world, to teach, to heal, to free others from the shackles of oppression. And each religious, according to the particular charism or call of the society, engages herself in this sense. We have to say no in order to stand up in faithfulness to the mission to which we are called. This can happen in any congregation, not just in women's congregations. The important thing for me is to dialogue with those who tend to impose on us, making known our stand with confidence and conviction, which hopefully may lead to collaboration rather than an either-or situation.
Well, that sounds very ideal, Hazel, but what happens if the bishop or superior is unwilling to dialogue? Noella?
I would honestly try, because it's Jesus's mission that's important and not the bishop or the congregation. The next step that I would suggest is to go through a team that arbitrates and helps to find a solution. And if this doesn't work and the sisters don't have the freedom to carry out their mission, the congregation should move to fresher pastures where they can be more constructive and beneficial in their mission.
Hazel, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, yes. To quote examples from the study, one of the respondents in the study said that in view of continued disagreement with the clergy, despite representing it many times, the sisters finally left the particular mission. Another said that in view of continuing disagreement, they threatened to leave the mission. And then probably they were taken seriously and things began to improve. When I had the experience of being Superior General, I did have the experience of having to accept an apostolic visitor to the congregation suddenly for reasons which I do not know. I did not know. He was supposed to examine the governance of the society, and I had to defer everything to him. But I could not do so. I was summoned by the dicastery in Rome a number of times to answer all kinds of questions regarding my governance. I did not have any any lawyer, so to say, to come to my rescue, but I honestly answered whatever I was asked to clarify. It did mean a lot of suffering through that experience, but in the end, I not only completed my term as Superior General, but was elected for another term. What I realized is that you do not need to say yes to everything. I was able to take the dialogue to the Vatican, and I believe that God's grace was there to help me. One's conviction in what one does and our faith in God will give us courage to act according to the mission that God has given us, that we are called to. The Spirit is with us and inspires women as well.
I think one of the problems, which again is not unique to the church, is the way we exercise authority. Too often we see it as giving orders to those over whom we have power. And one of the observations of the study was that seminarians who get used to sisters serving them do not grow up in respecting sisters as consecrated persons like them. Instead, they look on them as mere servants. Unfortunately, this mentality is carried on when they become parish priests. They order the sisters around, even if the sisters are senior to them. And I was just wondering, Philip, as a male religious, do you think there's any truth in this?
Well, Astrid, yes, I've seen this happen, sometimes among very good priests and male religious. But just look at the word we use, the word mere servants. It also tells us something about attitude. It is about human dignity. What is the point of seeing God in a piece of bread when we cannot see God in people around us? You might feel I'm anti-clerical in the way I speak, but I'm not. I'm concerned about the theology by which we live. The theology of priesthood needs another close look. All this talk of becoming a superior being, this ontological transformation through ordination, it just does not hold water today. Again, how much are sisters going to tolerate? When complaints are made to the bishop, he often throws up his hands in despair and says he cannot manage some of his parish priests. Excuse me, but if he happened to be in the corporate world, he would lose his job. How long will sisters allow this to happen? This is not about humility and about bearing one's cross, sentiments that are often used by sisters. We have to take a stance on behalf of those coming after us. There are other sisters that are going to be treated and others after them and so on. Someone has to stop this. Women have to realize the power they have. If women stopped going to church, the church would die, no matter how many men line up for ordination. Let us face the truth. Women keep the church alive all over the world. And the sad thing is that at this time, women are allowing a church in dire need of reform to continue in its broken state. What are you holding up? What sinful structure are you bolstering when it should rightly collapse? The Spirit is trying to change things around, but women are blocking this. I think this really needs reflecting on and acting on.
Strong words, Philip. Women have to realize the power they have, and they should stop holding up sinful structures that should rightly collapse. Well, I think the articles that have come out, this study and the panel discussion that we're having right now, the participants who are here, those who are going to be watching this later, are all attempts to dismantle these sinful structures and reform our church. What we do with the results of the studies is therefore critical. Noella, what do you say? What do you see as the way forward?
And the task ahead of us is immense. We have to conscientize our sisters. And remember, we are 90,000 of us in the country. We also have to conscientize our hierarchy and be firm that we shall decide our own future and our involvement in the Indian church by and for ourselves. We don't need fathering, if I may use that term. We are adult enough to manage ourselves. Unfortunately, I find that most sisters I have met seem to have stopped their spiritual and emotional growth at the time they've joined their convents. Why so? What are we doing to our young recruits that they turn out to be blocked? And this comes to the question of formation. We must deal with formation. Human development must be understood in the context of gender equality. We need to train our young sisters in law, which would be legal and human rights, theology, which would include feminist theology, prophetic call and mission, spirituality, which would be emerging trends in religious life and a feminist interpretation of the Bible, socio-anthropology and cultural biases. The environment obviously contributes to the formation, an environment where you can have healthy adult relationships with one another, with organizational support.
Hazel, would you like to add something to that?
You know, I really appreciate the points that Noella has made, which are very comprehensive, especially in the area of formation. But I want to say one thing, that I am concerned that when we were commissioned by the CRI to do a study on behalf of the sisters who showed so much interest, and when we come out with the fact findings showing the difficulties faced by sisters and what they can do about it, that sometimes I find that we lack in responsibility to take the movement forward. It's not enough only to do a study, but this study has to be owned by the CRI. Owned by the CRI, as if we want to do something. Otherwise, what was it? Just an exercise in futility. And that it should not be. And at the same time, who can change? We cannot expect others to change us and say that the blame is here and there and elsewhere. We have to take the initiatives also to make the change in the situations that we think are important. And therefore, my concern is that the CRI itself as a body should first of all own the study. Secondly, take practical steps to see how these things are going to work out. They're not going to work out like automatically in any of the fields. We are in touch with people who resist, people who favor, people who are for us, people who are not for us. And so how do we dialogue? And how do we educate ourselves to be able to take the stands that we need that create confidence and conviction? So these are the things that I'm concerned with in what the CRI is going to do as a result. See, we have helped to do the study, but we would need collaboration. As Noella has said earlier, there are many younger sisters who are willing and happy maybe to take the responsibility. And here is where we have to identify those who would really be glad to be involved in such a work. There are people who come up for elections and executive committees and all, who see that minutes are written, fees are paid every year and all that. But somebody to give a kind of direction for the vision of the CRI. What vision should the CRI have in the country today, among the women of our country today? I think this is what has to be built up. And for this, I would also recommend like a think tank. We would have to select a few, maybe who might help us, not only among the women, maybe even one or two men to help us in this process. And then there are many houses of formation also. So I think here even Noella can say a little more about how the academic programs in our seminaries and houses of formation can be shaped in order to be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Hazel. Thank you. So, you know, you talked about initiatives which are there. So I was just thinking that, you know, they're already, I think the CRI has already started taking some very concrete steps in the Western region. So Noella, could you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Over the last few years, the Western region of the CRI has been working to get together a memorandum of understanding to be signed by a congregation when they enter any one of the 13 dioceses in the Western region. There's another contract to be used when the diocese hands over any of its works to a congregation. Both these contracts have been worked on by 4 religious, 2 sisters, a brother, and a priest. And we sincerely hope that they will prevent misunderstanding and pave the way for just and transparent dealings in the future.
Philip, would you like to say something on this?
Yes, I'd like to say something for all of us, not just for the women. I'd like to say something about synodality that the Pope is advocating as a fresh way of being church. The Pope has invited dioceses around the world to enter into dialogue with its people in preparation for the upcoming synod in 2023. He wants universal consultation. He's teaching us to listen to all voices. And if you look at the 3 synods recently held, you cannot but notice the growing importance of women and the need to listen to women. The agenda for women is coming more and more into the center of focus. I believe that this synod is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to speak up, not just women, all of us. I see this as a way forward.
Well, I think you made a good point, Philip, that we make use of the avenues that the Spirit opens up for us. However, I would just like to add a word of caution. And that is that it's important for bishops and priests to realize that when we have synods, given the structure of the church, they are the ones who call the shots. So being in power, they must realize that they have the responsibility to give a right when they see it's due, whether it is women voting at the synods or making spaces for women's voices to be heard and listening to them, or using inclusive language, or even using inclusive liturgy during these synods.
Well,
so, yes, Noella.
I just want to say here that all is not black. Over the last few years, just to refer to the Western again.
Yeah, but I got it difficult to get in, with great difficulty.
We, as I told you, they have been working on a memorandum of understanding. And also, they have been working on a regional committee for collaboration and reconciliation, RCCR, which will include bishops, clergy, and women religious. So we sincerely hope that this will prevent misunderstandings and pave the way for more just and transparent dealings. Along the same line, we women religious were also invited to study, comment, and give our suggestions to the Federation of Asian Bishops Conference, the FABC, Jubilee draft document. This brought together about 20-25 of us women religious from around the country. And these sessions are very illuminating. We acknowledged and sought a change from the official church that continues to perpetuate gender discrimination through its androcentric biblical interpretations, theological articulations, sexist language, and all male leadership. To go further, just as patriarchy pervades all areas of a woman's life in society, so too church structures and doctrines control and domesticate Christian women. Thus, we talked of a different approach to the usual up-down one. If the bishops are serious about including women, we reminded them, no women, no church.
Thanks, Noella. Well, at least what's happening, what has begun with the Western region and with the FABC seems like they are beacons of hope and gives us something positive to hang on to. So thanks a lot. I think this has been a very interesting and insightful conversation. For those of you who haven't seen the book, this is the book. Unfortunately, you're going to see laterally inverted, but this is the study which has been brought out. And I now hand it over to Chantal to find all those revolutionary questions and throw it to the panelist.
Chantal, you're muted.
I have just a technical question that came up in chat. Where can we read this study? Where will it be public? Will it be in the internet? Will it be buyable for people?
Maybe you can put it on your website. On
Okay.
the website of Voices.
Great. That's easy.
For that. Otherwise, if they'd like a copy, maybe I can put my email ID on the chat. But I think if it's on your website, they can easily download a copy.
Yeah, if we can put it on our website, it's easiest. Thank you. The one question was, why the questionnaire was only to superiors, whether there are plans also to ask, sisters that are lower in the hierarchy?
Hazel, would you like to answer that?
Yes, we could actually take this study much further. We began to see, for instance, there is such a variety in the identity of religious congregations in India, north, south, east, west. Some are Latin, Syrio-Malankara, Syrio-Malabar. Then some are founded in the country itself. Some are founded foreign foundations. There is such a variety of congregations, and I don't think even the CRI Secretariat has all the information about all this. And then the incidence of these problems, of course, may have to be taken up at a zonal level, maybe at zones. And then, of course, maybe we can see how it will complete an all India level view of sisters' issues and problems, especially those issues which have not surfaced so clearly in the present study. That there were a few questions which are there and which are still remain, but definitely the issue of clergy sexual abuse, for instance, is very much present in the country, and it has not it has not surfaced in our study, except for a little passing reference of 3 respondents. So I feel that if the CRI can plan out, this will need some planning of whether we could entrust these studies to groups of people who could really conduct a scientific research on it, or whether we can have sisters, who are acquainted with these problems, who have professional expertise, who would be willing to study. Definitely the willingness to study the problems is there, because unless we study and know the problems more closely, we cannot apply solutions, and we cannot really think of talking of how to solve it, because we don't know what we're talking about often. So I don't know, I just said that as a few steps. If we want, we can do it. If we want, we can do it.
You touched in your study different levels of power, economical power, hierarchical power. There is a question to Brother Philippe about this economical power. There is a suggestion that that many religious orders, female religious orders, are dependent on financial support from bishops, and that's actually stopped them from being critical because they fear that they will be cut out of money. Is there any comment or solution you have in mind in this situation?
Thank you for the question. There is no easy solution to this, and I've seen it. And you'll find that when religious congregations are begun, unless right at the beginning, the bishop that founds them or the priest that founds them is able to ensure sustainability, that they themselves have the power over their own future, that congregation should not be founded. Rome gives permission too easily, though I know that the present dispensation, Rome is really checking up. It's not easy now to found a congregation. You have to do much more. But historically, that's what's happened. It's about control. And that's built into the system there.
Thank you very much. There was also interest about this sacramental abuse. I think Noella, you were talking about that. Do you know perhaps a concrete situation why it happened? I mean, what was the reasons that religious sisters were denied sacramental service?
It's more prevalent in the rural areas than in the urban areas. And it's more prevalent because there the sisters depend much more on the fathers. And the fathers kind of get into the lives of the sisters, wanting to know more and more, as one of the provincials here told us. And it's curiosity, it's power, it's, I don't know, because they think they know it all. And I also feel that, you know, our Indian society is so patriarchal. It's got a great deal to do with that. We have to work so much to overcome on so many levels.
Also, there was another question for you, because we were talking about formation. Would it be the possible reason that a very young girls, very young women join a religious life without, let's say, adult life experience just after school? Would this be one of the reasons that make them vulnerable?
Absolutely. And many of the congregations that I know of, and all of us in India, we know that congregations get these young people because of numbers, so that later on they can man women their institutions. But are they really interested in the life of that young woman, what she can do, what she is interested in, and what is her spirituality and mission? But, you know, we have these, let me tell you these, what should I say? You have these fairs where the diocese has a fair where all congregations can come and talk to the sisters on 2 or 3 days or 4 days, especially in the East Coast. And that's where the sisters come and grab girls and take them back. It's absolutely ridiculous. Others can vouch for the same thing, but I certainly wouldn't send our sisters there. We did go, and that's what happened. The others could, yes. Oh, I'm breathing heavily because of it, but it's so true. It's so true.
Sorry.
No, it is also often said that as a society begins to get more developed, more opportunities given for education, for employment, for training, etc., then women's ambitions also are fired with these opportunities that they have. And so they go on in order to be self-employed, to be independent, and to have a profession of their own, a career of their own. And usually in those kind of places or areas which are more urbanized, we find that vocations are diminishing very much. And therefore,
Hazel's gone static.
Yeah, we lost her, I guess. Okay, so I will just add another question, the last one.
Becomes an opportunity for them also.
Okay, thank you very much, Hazel. I will just add the last question. Do you see any practical advices or any concrete steps how we can convince hierarchy or bodies like Conference Religious India to own this study and really to put it in practice?
We shall try.
And it's very telling that nobody from the National Executive is here today. Rita's here. Rita was the one who commissioned the study in 2018. But from the secretary is here also. But other than that, nobody is from the National Executive.
This is one of the big difficulties also that we have to work with.
Yeah, I guess the whole issue of abuse in the church is that you, at the end, you tell about the abuse to the hierarchy itself. I mean, so it's a little bit difficult, to convince the hierarchy that the problem exists and that we are all part of it. Thank you so much. We're running out of time, so I will be closing it now, but it was really fascinating to hear you. And we definitely would like to continue to listen to you and to have news from your work. Thank you all who attended this meeting. Thank you for your attention, and please follow our website when we will put the document. Also, I will put here in the chat the address of the website we dedicated completely to religious sisters. You can find their information, sisters' voices, and also some concrete ideas how to help sister in difficulties. Please check out this website. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody, and thank you to Voices of Faith.